What if I told you that some of the most powerful moments in history were shaped not by kings or generals, but by people whose names were barely known? Tonight, we're stepping into the shadows, behind enemy lines, in candlelit back rooms, inside coded letters and invisible ink. Spies were quietly changing the course of wars, toppling empires, and outsmarting entire governments. From daring double agents and master code breakers to ordinary people living extraordinary double lives, these secret operatives relied on deception, patience, and razor-sharp intelligence to survive. In this video, we'll uncover the secret tactics of famous spies, the hidden tricks, psychological maneuvers, and bold gambles that made their missions succeed or fail spectacularly. How did they pass messages without getting caught? How did they earn trust while living a lie? And what separated the legends from the forgotten? If you love untold history, clever strategies, and stories that feel almost too unbelievable to be true, you're in the right place. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video. It helps more history lovers discover these incredible stories. Comment below and tell me, if you were a spy, what skill would be your greatest advantage? And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another deep dive into the hidden side of history. When you're done watching, check out our related videos exploring legendary rulers, lost civilizations, and the real lives of historical icons. You might be surprised how often espionage shaped their destinies too. Now, dim the lights, sharpen your instincts, and trust no one. Let's enter the world of spies. The Art of Patience. Richard Sorge, Tokyo, 1930s. Neon lights, cigarette smoke, jazz humming in the background, diplomats in pressed suits, newspapers folded under arms, whiskey poured like water, and in the middle of it all, a tall, charming German journalist with sharp eyes and a lazy smile. That was Richard Sorge. If you met him at a party, you'd think intellectual, maybe a bit reckless, definitely fun after 2 drinks. You would not think one of the most valuable spies of the 20th century. That's the first lesson. Real espionage does not look like espionage. It looks like networking. Sorge did not sneak across rooftops. He did not wear black coats in alleyways. He built credibility. He worked as a journalist in Tokyo, a respected one. He wrote sharp political analysis. He drank with diplomats. He asked smart questions. He listened more than he spoke. And here's the key. He was openly pro-Nazi. Yes, a Soviet spy who joined the Nazi party. That sounds insane. It was brilliant, because that party membership opened doors. German officials trusted him. They saw him as one of us. He gained access to the German embassy in Tokyo. He became close to Ambassador Eugene OTT, close enough to read sensitive cables, close enough to advise him. Imagine that, a spy not breaking into offices, but being invited in. Espionage at its highest level is not about stealing documents. It's about becoming someone who gets handed them. Sorge didn't fly in for a mission and fly out. He lived the role. For years he built a social circle. He developed routines. He became part of Tokyo's foreign elite scene. People knew his laugh. They expected him at events. They trusted him. That kind of deep cover takes patience and nerves, because every day you wake up and you are lying. Not small lies, big ones, identity-level lies. He was German, loyal, analytical, nationalist, except he wasn't. He was reporting to Moscow. Here's something simple but powerful. People talk when they feel important. Sorge understood ego like a surgeon understands anatomy. He let officials feel smart. He let them lecture. He nodded. He poured drinks. He laughed at the right moments. And alcohol. Alcohol is an intelligence asset. loose lips, relaxed guard. Off-the-record comments that are very much on the record, if you are a spy with a good memory. Sorge didn't need to force secrets out of people. He let them spill. That's social engineering before the term even existed. Of course, information means nothing if you can't send it. Sorge worked with a small network. One key member was radio operator Max Clausen. They transmitted coded messages back to the Soviet Union. Carefully, quietly. Radio transmission was risky. Japanese counterintelligence monitored signals. Too frequent, too sloppy, and you were done. So they timed it. Short bursts, encrypted. Every transmission was a gamble. Imagine sitting in a dim apartment, curtains closed, equipment humming softly, knowing that a van with direction-finding gear could be triangulating your location. That ticking clock in the prologue, this is where you hear it. Now we reach the moment. Hitler preparing to launch Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Sorge learned the details, the timing, the scale. He sent warnings to Moscow. Here's the tragic twist. At first, Stalin didn't fully trust the reports. He had been warned before. He suspected misinformation. Paranoia was normal at that level, but Sorge kept reporting, calm, specific, confident. When the invasion finally came, it confirmed what he had said, and then he delivered another crucial piece of intelligence. Japan would not attack the Soviet Union in the east. That mattered, because it meant Stalin could move divisions from Siberia to defend Moscow. Fresh troops, winter-trained, hardened. Many historians argue this intelligence helped the Soviets hold the line. No dramatic chase scene, no explosion, just a message, sent quietly, changing the balance of a world war. Living two lives, but here's the psychological cost. Sorge blended in so well that he almost became the mask. He enjoyed the lifestyle, the parties, the attention, the thrill. Some accounts say he grew overconfident, maybe reckless. That's the danger of deep cover. You start believing your own story. You laugh with people who would kill you if they knew the truth. You form bonds. You look into their eyes, and you betray them. Even if you believe your cause is just, that does something to a person. He was loyal to the Soviet Union, but he performed loyalty to Nazi Germany every single day. That's a strange split to carry. In 1941, Japanese authorities cracked down on Soviet spy rings. Radio transmissions were traced, networks unraveled. Sorge was arrested. No rooftop escape, no last-minute rescue. Interrogations followed. He did not break in a dramatic Hollywood way. He admitted his role. Calmly, he was sentenced to death, and in 1944, he was executed by hanging in Sugamo prison. Moscow, the country he risked everything for, did not publicly acknowledge him at the time. For years, he was barely mentioned. Imagine that. You give warnings that shape the war. You live a double life for nearly a decade, and you die quietly. No medals, no parade, just silence. If there's one thing to take from Richard Sorge, it's this. Patience can be lethal. He didn't rush. He didn't grab quick wins. He invested years into trust. He built relationships brick by brick. Espionage is often less about speed and more about endurance. The spy who lasts is the spy who wins. He understood proximity. The closer you are to power, the less you need to steal. Information flows downhill. You just need to be standing in the right place. Here's the final tension. Was he a traitor? To Germany, yes. To the Soviet Union, he was loyal. But what does loyalty mean when it requires constant deception? Sorge lived as a traitor to serve what he believed was a higher allegiance. He smiled at men whose secrets he transmitted. He toasted leaders he secretly opposed. That paradox sits at the heart of espionage. Spies are patriots and liars, heroes and betrayers, sometimes both at the same time. So when you think of espionage, don't picture the flashy gadgets. Picture a crowded Tokyo bar, a journalist leaning back in his chair, listening, laughing, storing away details, years of quiet observation. Then a coded message sent into the night. No gunfire, no applause, just history shifting softly. Next, we move from patience to seduction. Seduction as strategy. Mata Hari Paris, 1914. Silk curtains, candlelight, officers in polished boots. War maps folded away for one evening of wine and distraction, and then she enters. Jewels, veils, slow movements. A story about temples in the East, a stage name that sounds like sunlight. Mata Hari. If Richard Sorge was patience, she was performance. But here's the thing. The legend is bigger than the evidence, and that gap, that's where this chapter lives. Let's strip away the Hollywood version. No hidden daggers in garters. No secret microfilm in perfume bottles. No seducing generals while whispering coded phrases. What she really had was access. Mata Hari was a Dutch dancer and courtesan who reinvented herself as an exotic performer. She claimed to be Javanese royalty. She wasn't, but she sold the story well, and elite men loved mystery in wartime France. Officers and diplomats were everywhere, lonely, bored, flattered by attention. She moved in those circles with ease. That's not spycraft, that's social engineering. Now, let's be precise. Seduction in espionage isn't always about romance. It's about vulnerability. People in power have weaknesses: ego, desire, loneliness, vanity. Mata Hari understood that attention is currency. She listened, she charmed, she made powerful men feel chosen, and when someone feels special, they talk. Did she actively collect secrets? Sometimes, yes. French intelligence even recruited her at one point. They believed she could gather information from German officers. But here's the uncomfortable truth. She was not a master spy. She was an amateur navigating a professional battlefield, and that battlefield was ruthless. Her biggest asset wasn't information. It was ambiguity. No one quite knew who she was. Dutch, exotic, a traveler between borders. That flexibility gave her mobility during wartime. She could cross lines others couldn't. But ambiguity cuts both ways. When paranoia rises, the mysterious person becomes the suspect, and World War I was drowning in paranoia. France was losing men by the thousands. The public wanted explanations. They wanted villains. Enter the perfect scapegoat. Foreign, sensual, independent, unapologetic. Mata Hari fit the narrative. Let's talk about bias. At the time, the idea of a female spy was both scandalous and convenient. It fed into cultural fears about female sexuality and manipulation. The courts painted her as a temptress who used her body as a weapon. They exaggerated her influence. They inflated the damage she supposedly caused. It made for a better story. A seductive femme fatale bringing down armies, that sells newspapers. A minor informant with limited access. Not so much. Her trial leaned heavily on narrative. Thin evidence. Intercepted messages that were suspicious but not definitive. Intelligence reports filled with speculation. The myth did most of the work. Wartime governments operate under pressure. They need control. They need deterrence. Executing a spy sends a message, even if that spy is more symbol than strategist. French authorities accused her of passing secrets to Germany that led to massive casualties. Historians still debate how much real intelligence she actually provided. Most modern analysis suggests the damage was minimal. But by the time that became clear, it didn't matter. She had become useful not as a spy. As an example, courtroom, closed doors, military judges. The proceedings were swift. The tone was harsh. She was portrayed as greedy, immoral, disloyal. Her lifestyle was put on trial as much as her actions. She tried to defend herself, said she had lovers, yes, accepted money, yes, but insisted she wasn't a traitor in the grand, destructive sense they claimed. It didn't change the outcome. When fear dominates logic, nuance dies. She was sentenced to death by firing squad. On October 15, 1917, dawn, she reportedly refused a blindfold. That detail stuck. It fed the legend. The fearless seductress facing death with calm defiance. Whether embellished or exact, it became part of the myth. Gunshots, silence, and just like that, the story was sealed. Here's the psychological insight. Sometimes the story matters more than the facts. Mata Hari became the archetype of the seductive spy. Books, films, posters, a cautionary tale, a fantasy figure, but the actual intelligence she provided, likely minor, possibly exaggerated by German handlers who used her as a pawn, possibly overstated by French prosecutors who needed a conviction. She lived in gray zones, and gray zones make people uncomfortable. So history simplified her. Femme fatale, traitor, executed, clean narrative, messy truth. If we zoom out, what do we see? Not a master of codes, not a long-term infiltrator like Sorge. We see someone who understood perception, and perception is powerful. She knew how to create a persona, how to captivate an audience, how to move between social strata. That is influence. But influence without institutional backing is fragile. Sorge had a disciplined network, secure communications, strategic patience. Mata Hari had charm, connections, and inconsistent handlers. One was an architect of intelligence. The other became a symbol of it. The lesson here isn't that seduction is the ultimate spy tool. It's that myth can outlive reality. In espionage, reputation can be weaponized. Governments shape narratives to manage fear. The public consumes stories that fit expectations. Mata Hari fit expectations perfectly. Exotic outsider, dangerous beauty, hidden loyalties. She became the embodiment of wartime anxiety about women, foreigners, and secrecy. And once that label sticks, it's almost impossible to peel off. If you strip away the glamour, her story is less about espionage skill and more about vulnerability. A woman navigating powerful men, a performer navigating politics, a scapegoat navigating a war she didn't fully control. And that might be more tragic than thrilling, because real espionage isn't just about clever deception. It's also about who gets protected and who gets sacrificed. So now we've seen patience in Tokyo and myth in Paris. Next, we enter a world of forged passports, shifting names, and a man who treated identity like a wardrobe. Time for a master of disguise. The master of disguise. Sidney Riley, Russia, early 1900s. Empires wobbling, factories roaring, revolution whispering in cafes before it screamed in the streets. And somewhere between the chaos and the opportunity stands Sidney Riley. Or maybe that wasn't his name. That's the thing about Riley. Even his origin story feels like a draft that was never finalized. British, Irish, Russian-born. Some records say one thing, others say another. He helped the confusion. A man who lives by identity learns to blur his own. If Richard Sorge was patience, Riley was velocity. Riley collected passports like souvenirs, different names, different backgrounds, different accents when needed. He moved between countries and political camps, with the confidence of someone who believed reinvention was normal. And maybe for him, it was. This is persona construction at an elite level. You don't just change clothes, you change worldview. You adjust posture. You speak the language of the room. Industrialist, he could do that. Engineer, sure. Investor, looking to fund new weapons tech. Absolutely. His strength was adaptability. In unstable times, flexible identity is power. Before the revolution fully erupted, Riley was already moving through industrial circles, factories, oil fields, arms production. He targeted information that mattered: technology, infrastructure, military capacity. Industrial espionage isn't glamorous. It's technical. It's about blueprints and production numbers. It's about who can build what and how fast. Riley understood that wars are won in factories long before soldiers reach the front. So he positioned himself near the engines of power. Money opened doors. Business conversations revealed more than official briefings, and when you look like an investor, people show you everything. The Russian Empire collapses. The Bolsheviks rise. Street protests turn into regime change and chaos. Chaos is a playground for spies. Borders are loose. Records are inconsistent. Loyalties are fluid. Riley reportedly involved himself in plots against the Bolsheviks. There are accounts linking him to attempts to undermine or even remove the new Soviet leadership. Some stories say he tried to coordinate counter-revolutionary efforts. Others paint him as more opportunistic than ideological. With Riley, separating fact from legend is hard. But here's what we know. He moved inside revolutionary Russia at extreme personal risk. He operated in an environment where suspicion meant immediate execution. That's not subtle infiltration. That's high-stakes gambling. Now we hit the interesting psychological layer. Was Riley a disciplined intelligence officer, or a talented conman who found intelligence work exciting? He thrived on risk. He loved bold moves. He seemed to enjoy operating on the edge. That's a dangerous trait in espionage. Calculated patience wins long games. Adrenaline can cloud judgment. Riley's myth grew during his lifetime. Newspapers hinted at his exploits. Rumors spread. Some even claim he inspired fictional spies later on. But myths are tricky. The more you believe your own legend, the easier it is to overreach. Riley didn't just fake identities. He performed them, and performance requires energy. Imagine waking up and deciding who you are today. Your speech patterns change. Your political opinions shift depending on the audience. Your loyalties adjust. That constant adaptation can sharpen a mind. It can also fracture it. Identity becomes modular, swappable. The danger: losing track of the core. If there even was one. Enter Soviet counterintelligence. After the revolution, the Bolsheviks formed the Cheka, ruthless, efficient, suspicious of everyone. They understood something crucial. If foreign agents are operating inside your territory, you don't just chase them, you bait them. In 1925, Soviet intelligence orchestrated what became known as a deception operation. They created a fake anti-Bolshevik resistance network, a honey trap for foreign operatives. Riley took the bait, believing he was reconnecting with underground allies. He crossed back into Soviet territory. That decision sealed his fate. He was arrested. No cinematic escape through snow-covered forests. Just containment. Interrogation followed. Soviet records suggest he confessed involvement in anti-Bolshevik activities. There are debates about what he admitted and under what conditions, but the outcome is clear. In 1925, he was executed by Soviet authorities, and like many spies, his death was wrapped in rumor. Some claimed he survived. Others spun stories of secret deals. Mystery clung to him, even in death. Let's zoom out. Riley represents a different archetype from Sorge. Sorge embedded slowly, built trust carefully, maintained discipline. Riley moved fast, switched identities, took bold swings. One approach is chess, the other is high-stakes poker. Both can win, both can lose spectacularly. Riley's downfall shows the limits of agility without restraint. He believed he could navigate chaos indefinitely, but chaos eventually stabilizes. And when it does, systems hunt back. The blurred line, here's the core tension. Spies and con artists share tools: charm, deception, improvisation, confidence. The difference lies in structure. A con artist serves himself. An intelligence officer serves a state. Riley operated in that gray zone. It's not always clear which side weighed more in his motivations, and that ambiguity fuels his legend. The Russian Revolution is remembered for mass protests, gunfire, red flags. But beneath that noise was another war. Foreign agents testing the new regime. The new regime testing foreign agents. Layer upon layer of deception. Riley stepped into that storm willingly, and for a while, he surfed it until the wave closed over him. If Sorge teaches patience, and Matahari shows the power of narrative, Riley reminds us of something else. Identity is a weapon, but it's also unstable. The more versions of yourself you create, the harder it is to know which one survives when the mask is ripped off. He played the game boldly, but in the quiet war, boldness is not always the winning strategy. Sometimes the loudest legend leaves the shortest operational life. Next, we move from lone operators to institutional betrayal, from shifting identities to trusted gentlemen inside the very heart of power. The Invisible Ink Network, MI6, Kim Philby, and the Cambridge 5 London 1930s, Stone colleges, intellectual debates, young men in tweed arguing about fascism over cheap wine. The war hasn't fully arrived yet, but ideology is already in the air. This is where it starts, not in a smoky trench, not in a foreign embassy, but in a university common room. The Cambridge 5 were not recruited with money. They were recruited with belief, and that makes all the difference. Most spies get reduced to three motives: money, ego, or coercion. The Cambridge 5, ideology. They believed capitalism was broken. They believed fascism was rising. They believed the Soviet experiment was the future, and belief is powerful fuel. Unlike paid informants, ideological spies do not need constant financial incentives. They see themselves as part of a moral mission that makes them patient, disciplined, committed, and very hard to flip. Here's what makes this case chilling. They didn't break into intelligence agencies, and they joined them. Kim Philby rose inside British intelligence itself, eventually becoming a senior officer within MI6, a man tasked with hunting Soviet spies. Let that sink in. The hunter was the mole. Institutional infiltration is the highest form of espionage. You're not stealing secrets from outside. You're sitting at the table where strategy is designed. You read classified files as part of your job. You attend briefings. You shape policy discussions. No need for dramatic brush passes in alleyways. The secrets arrive in official folders. The Cambridge 5 had another advantage: background, upper class, educated, well-spoken, the right schools, the right accents. In mid-20th century Britain, class signaled trust. If you sounded right, you were assumed loyal. Privilege became camouflage. Counterintelligence at the time often focused outward, on foreigners, on obvious outsiders. It struggled to imagine that betrayal could wear a familiar face. That blind spot lasted years. This wasn't flashy. Documents were memorized. Notes were discreetly transferred. meetings arranged carefully. Information flowed from British intelligence to Moscow. Operations were compromised, agents exposed, strategic plans revealed, and yet suspicion often drifted elsewhere. Philby even helped investigate breaches, steering suspicion away from himself. That's the quiet horror of it. He wasn't just leaking secrets, he was shaping the search for the leaker. Espionage isn't just technical, it's relational. Philby worked alongside colleagues who trusted him deeply, shared drinks, shared jokes, shared war stories. Some considered him a friend. When betrayal finally surfaced, it wasn't just professional damage, it was personal. Imagine discovering that someone who sat across from you for years was feeding your nation's secrets to your enemy. Trust collapses in slow motion, and institutions built on discretion suffer invisible fractures. Whispers began in the 1950s. Defectors hinted at moles. Intelligence reports pointed toward internal compromise. Philby was questioned, denied everything, calmly. He even held a press conference once, publicly denying the allegations. He looked composed, reasonable, almost offended, and for a time it worked. Because espionage at this level thrives on doubt. As long as uncertainty exists, you survive. The Cambridge Five transmitted massive amounts of classified information over years. Some historians argue their actions altered Cold War dynamics significantly. But here's the subtle part. The real damage wasn't just operational, it was psychological. Allied intelligence agencies began to distrust one another. Internal vetting tightened. Paranoia increased. The quiet war turned inward. Every briefing room now carried a question. Who else is lying? Philby defected to Moscow. No dramatic shootout. He slipped away. A quiet exit. When confirmation came that he had indeed been a Soviet agent all along, shock rippled through British intelligence. This wasn't a low-level clerk. This was a senior officer. The embarrassment was enormous. The strategic consequences serious, and for Moscow, it was a propaganda victory. What makes this chapter different from Sorge or Riley? The Cambridge Five operated for decades. That kind of sustained deception requires emotional control. You build a career, earn promotions, accept honors, all while feeding secrets to the other side. That's not improvisation. That's long-term alignment with a belief system stronger than your passport. Think of it this way. Sorge infiltrated a foreign embassy. Riley infiltrated revolutionary chaos. Philby infiltrated trust, and trust is the most valuable asset in intelligence work. It allows agencies to function efficiently, to share information, to coordinate strategy. Once trust cracks, everything slows. Every document double-checked, every colleague quietly assessed. The damage lingers long after the mole is gone. Let's ask the hard question. Did Philby feel guilt? Accounts vary. Some say he remained ideologically committed to the end. Others suggest he became disillusioned later in life. But here's what matters. To live as a mole inside an intelligence agency, you must compartmentalize at extreme levels. You attend a colleague's wedding, then transmit secrets that may put his operations at risk. You congratulate a promotion, then report vulnerabilities in the department. That level of emotional detachment is rare and chilling. The Cambridge Five teach us something uncomfortable. The most dangerous spies may not be outsiders sneaking in. They may be insiders already seated comfortably. Espionage is not always about breaking barriers. Sometimes it's about being welcomed through them. So now we've seen patience in Tokyo, performance in Paris, reinvention in revolutionary, Russia, and quiet treason in London. Next, we shift from elite institutions to occupied territory, from drawing rooms to resistance cells, from polished accents to to a woman with a wooden leg outmaneuvering the Gestapo. France, 1941. Occupied territory. Nazi flags hanging where cafe signs used to be. Radios confiscated. Neighbors whispering instead of talking. And moving through this tension quietly is a woman with a limp. Her name was Virginia Hall. The Gestapo would later call her the most dangerous of all Allied spies, which is impressive, especially since she had a wooden leg. Underestimation as strategy. Virginia Hall lost part of her leg in a hunting accident years before the war. She named the prosthetic Cuthbert. That detail feels almost too casual for what came next. When she tried to join the US Foreign Service, she was rejected. Physical disability. War changed the rules. The British Special Operations Executive so needed people willing to operate in occupied Europe. Hall volunteered. And here's where it gets interesting. The very thing that limited her career became an advantage. No one expected a limping American woman to be building resistance networks. Underestimation is operational gold. Building resistance cells. Hall wasn't parachuted in for a quick mission. She stayed. She organized. She built networks across Vichy and occupied France. Resistance groups need structure. Safe houses, couriers, supply routes, communication protocols. She coordinated sabotage efforts, arranged weapons drops, helped downed Allied pilots escape. This is logistics-heavy espionage. It's management under extreme risk. One compromised contact could unravel everything. So she kept cells compartmentalized. People knew only what they needed to know. That's classic tradecraft. Radio under surveillance communication was the lifeline. So relied heavily on radio operators. But German counterintelligence tracked transmissions aggressively. Every time a radio hummed to life, it risked detection. Hall worked closely with operators, scheduling brief, coded bursts to London. Too long on air, you're triangulated. Too predictable, you're caught. Imagine tapping out a message knowing a van with direction-finding equipment could be narrowing in. The clock ticks louder here than in Tokyo. Counter-surveillance occupied France wasn't forgiving. The Gestapo ran informant networks, random checks, curfews. Hall mastered counter-surveillance techniques. She varied routes, changed clothing styles, used cover identities. Journalist, socialite, farmer's wife. She blended into markets, rode trains, walked country roads. You don't outrun the Gestapo, you outthink them. The net tightens. By 1942, the Germans knew something was wrong in Lyon and surrounding regions. Resistance activity was increasing. Prison breaks, intelligence leaks, sabotage. They circulated descriptions of a limping woman. That's a problem. When your most distinct feature becomes your identifier, mobility shrinks. The Gestapo made capturing her a priority. Posters, alerts, interrogations. She became hunted. Escape over the Pyrenees. When the situation grew too dangerous, London ordered her out. She crossed the Pyrenees mountains on foot, with a wooden leg. Think about that for a second. Rough terrain, winter conditions, smugglers guiding small groups across the border into Spain. Physical strain was constant. Each step calculated. There's a dry humor here. At one point she radioed London about concerns regarding her leg during the escape. The reply suggested she should eliminate Cuthbert if necessary. She clarified that Cuthbert was not an agent. Sometimes even in espionage, communication glitches are painfully literal. She made it across. Most wanted woman in France, still free. Returning to the fire, here's what separates Hall from many operatives. She went back, this time under American intelligence, working with the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. She disguised herself more heavily, dyed her hair gray, adopted rural mannerisms, passed as an elderly milkmaid in some accounts. She re-established contact with resistance fighters, organized supply drops for D-Day operations, trained guerrilla groups, all while German forces were actively searching for her. That's not just courage, that's sustained operational focus under pressure. Being underestimated, gender bias worked in her favor. German officials often dismissed women as peripheral, messengers at best. Hall weaponized that bias. She listened in rooms where men spoke freely. She moved in spaces considered low threat. She wasn't flashy. No grand seductions. No dramatic disguises every 5 minutes. Just steady competence, which is often more dangerous. Psychological endurance. Now let's talk about the mental load. Constant movement, false names, friends captured, some executed, no stable home. The wooden leg wasn't just physical strain. It was a daily reminder of vulnerability. And yet, she operated at high efficiency. Espionage glamorizes adrenaline, but the real strain is monotony mixed with fear. Every knock at the door could be arrest. Every missed signal could mean compromise. Hall endured that for years. The Gestapo's frustration, the Germans never caught her. They circulated increasingly urgent warnings. Interrogations of captured resistance members yielded fragments, but not enough. She remained elusive. In a war defined by mechanized brutality, one quiet operator kept slipping through. No grand confrontation, just persistent evasion. Physical limitation versus tactical strength. Virginia Hall flips a common narrative. She wasn't powerful because she overcame disability in a dramatic, cinematic way. She was powerful because she integrated it into her operational reality. She planned routes with terrain in mind, managed pace, delegated physically demanding tasks when necessary. Espionage isn't about perfection, it's about adaptation, and she adapted relentlessly. Quiet impact, her networks disrupted German logistics, supported Allied advances, saved lives, but much of her work remained classified for years. Like many in the Quiet War, her impact was structural, hard to see from the outside. You won't find a single explosive moment that defines her legacy. You find patterns, resistance groups that survived, supply lines that held, messages that arrived. The core lesson: if the Cambridge Five show us betrayal from within, Virginia Hall shows us resistance from beneath. She didn't infiltrate a palace. She built parallel structures under occupation, and she did it while being underestimated at nearly every step. In espionage, invisibility is strength. Sometimes invisibility comes from disguise. Sometimes it comes from society's own blind spots. So now we've seen patience in Tokyo, myth in Paris, identity in revolution, institutional betrayal in London, resistance in occupied France. Next, we step into something even stranger, a man who created an entire fictional spy network and convinced Nazi Germany it was real. Now we move into something almost absurd, because this story sounds fake, and that's the point. Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo, was a Spanish civilian with no formal intelligence training. He wasn't recruited at first. He volunteered to fight fascism. British intelligence initially ignored him, so he did what any determined future master of deception would do. He started spying anyway. The man who made himself a spy, Pujol, approached the Germans first. He offered to spy for them in Britain. There was just one small issue. He wasn't in Britain. He was in Lisbon. So he began fabricating reports, entirely fictional intelligence. He read newspapers, tourist guides, public sources. Then he constructed believable military updates, descriptions of troop morale, shipping movements, weather observations, all invented. And the Germans believed him. They paid him, promoted him. He became, in their eyes, a reliable asset inside the UK, except he had never set foot there. Enter British intelligence eventually. British intelligence noticed something strange. German forces were reacting to intelligence that didn't quite line up with reality. They traced it back to Pujol. Instead of arresting him, they recruited him. Now he was a double agent, working for Britain, pretending to work for Germany, pretending to have a network of sub-agents. This is where it gets beautiful. The fictional network Pujol didn't just send reports. He invented 27 each with backstories, personalities, political leanings, expenses. One was a Welsh nationalist, another a disgruntled dock worker, another a bureaucrat with access to shipping logs. He created drama inside the fake network. One sub-agent got sick, another requested more funds. One died heroically during a mission, conveniently explaining a lapse in reporting. The Germans sent money to support these imaginary people. Britain intercepted the funds. It was espionage as long-form storytelling. Feeding the right lies. Here's the key to successful deception. You don't lie constantly. You mix truth with fiction. Pujol provided accurate but low-value intelligence regularly. That built credibility. Then, at crucial moments, He delivered carefully crafted falsehoods, which brings us to 1944, D-Day, the Allied invasion of Normandy. Operation Fortitude was designed to convince Germany that the invasion would land at Pas-de-Calais, not Normandy. It involved fake radio traffic, inflatable tanks, phantom divisions, actors posing as generals, and pugile. He fed the Germans intelligence, reinforcing the idea of a massive force waiting to strike elsewhere. Even after the Normandy landings began, he sent urgent messages insisting that this was a diversion. The real invasion, he warned, was still coming at Calais. Hitler hesitated. German reinforcements were delayed. Critical time was gained. In war, hours matter. Sometimes fiction buys them. The art of believability. Why did the Germans trust him so deeply? Because he occasionally failed. That sounds strange, but perfect spies are suspicious. At one point, Pugel's message about the Normandy landings arrived too late due to communication delays. He apologized profusely, expressed frustration, claimed he had tried to warn them sooner. The Germans were impressed by his dedication. He was awarded the Iron Cross. Let that sink in. A man working for the Allies received a German military decoration for loyalty, and the British later gave him an MBE. He is one of the few people decorated by both sides in World War II. Deception within deception. Pugel wasn't just lying to Germany. He was performing loyalty. His reports contained emotional nuance, frustration, pride, concern. He wrote as someone deeply committed to the German cause. That psychological texture made the fiction convincing. It's not enough to invent facts. You must invent feeling. Living the double life, unlike Philby, whose betrayal hollowed out trust from within. Pugel's deception aimed outward, but the strain was similar. Constant awareness, careful phrasing, no contradictions. One misplaced detail could unravel 27 imaginary people. Imagine keeping track of dozens of fake identities for years. Birthdays, habits, handwriting styles. That's not just deception. That's sustained cognitive theater. Fiction as a weapon operation. Fortitude worked. Historians widely credit the deception campaign as a major factor in the success of D-Day. Pugel's role was central. He didn't fire a weapon. He didn't sabotage a rail line. He wrote letters, carefully crafted lies, and those lies altered German troop movements, which altered battlefield outcomes, which altered history. The quiet absurdity, there's something almost funny about it. A man in a small room inventing characters, convincing a regime obsessed with intelligence that they had a vast network inside Britain. It feels like satire, but it was lethal satire. The Quiet War thrives on imagination. The core lesson: if Virginia Hall shows us resistance through structure, Pugel shows us deception through narrative architecture. He understood something simple. People believe stories that confirm what they already expect. Germany expected a large invasion at Calais, so he gave them that story, over and over, until they acted on it. So now we've seen patience, myth, identity, institutional betrayal, resistance, strategic fiction. Next, we move away from field agents entirely. No disguises, no fake networks, just mathematics, and a man who turned patterns into weapons at Bletchley Park. The Quiet War goes mechanical next. No trench coat, no forged passport, no seduction, just a quiet English estate filled with mathematicians, linguists, crossword champions, and the constant clatter of machines. Welcome to Bletchley Park. If the earlier chapters were about deception in motion, this one is about stillness, about staring at patterns until they blink. The War of Signals. During World War II, Germany relied heavily on encrypted communication. Orders moved through radio waves, scrambled by the Enigma machine. Enigma looked harmless, a typewriter in a wooden box. It wasn't. Each keystroke scrambled letters through rotating rotors, creating astronomical combinations. The encryption changed daily. Without the settings, messages were unreadable, which meant convoys could be sunk, troops could be ambushed, entire campaigns could pivot on hidden instructions. Information wasn't just currency anymore, it was survival. Enter Alan Turing. Alan Turing was not your typical spy. Socially awkward, brilliant, blunt, focused. He didn't need to charm diplomats. He needed to break mathematics. Turing helped design a machine called the bomb, an electromechanical device built to test possible Enigma settings at high speed. Instead of guessing manually, the bomb automated logical deductions. It searched for patterns, eliminated impossibilities. It turned cryptography into industrial-scale analysis. Pattern recognition. As warfare field spies gather information, codebreakers unlock it. Turing's genius was understanding that even complex encryption contains structure. Humans are creatures of habit. Operators reused phrases. Weather reports followed templates. Certain words appeared frequently. These predictable fragments, called cribs, became entry points. From a small guess, a massive key could unravel. It's like pulling one thread from a sweater, and suddenly the whole thing loosens. Intelligence without glory. Here's the strange part. Most of Bletchley's staff could not talk about their work. Not during the war. Not after. Total secrecy. Imagine contributing to a project that shortens a global conflict, and then going home in silence. No medals on display. No public acknowledgement. Just classified files and quiet memories. Turing himself returned to academic life after the war. His cryptographic achievements remained largely hidden for years. The quiet war leaves quiet heroes. Machine-assisted thinking. The bomb wasn't magic. It was logic, mechanized. Rows of spinning drums, electrical circuits clicking rapidly. When a potential solution aligned logically, the machine stopped. Then humans verified. This wasn't man versus machine, it was partnership. Turing saw something bigger too. If machines could process symbols logically, what else could they do? The foundations of modern computing were forming in those rooms. But at the time, the goal was simpler. Read the enemy's mail. The impact-breaking Enigma had enormous strategic consequences. Allied forces could reroute convoys away from U-boat packs, prepare for offensives, anticipate troop movements. Historians estimate that code-breaking at Bletchley shortened the war in Europe by years. Years, not through gunfire, through deduction. That's the purest version of the Quiet War. The silence after victory, after the war. Turing's life took a tragic turn. In 1952, he was prosecuted in Britain for homosexuality, which was illegal at the time. The same government he helped protect treated him as a criminal. He was forced to undergo chemical castration. 2 years later, he died from cyanide poisoning, officially ruled a suicide. It's a brutal irony. A man who helped secure national survival was destroyed by the very system he served. Decades later, he received a royal pardon. Recognition came, eventually, but not in time for him. Intelligence without a face. Turing represents a different kind of espionage power. He never crossed enemy lines, never built resistance cells, never fabricated networks. He stayed in one place and dismantled secrecy mathematically. This is intelligence stripped of theatrics. Just logic, just persistence, just long hours of staring at symbols until meaning appears. Silence as strategy. There's something haunting about Bletchley Park. Hundreds of people working in huts, typewriters tapping, machines spinning. Outside, war rages loudly. Inside, everything is methodical, measured, quiet. No one shouts victory when a message is cracked. They move to the next one because the enemy is always transmitting. The human cipher Turing himself was a kind of cipher, reserved, difficult for many to read, deeply internal. His mind operated at layers most people never saw. He decoded machines, but society failed to decode him. Espionage often celebrates charm and manipulation. This chapter reminds us that intellect alone can be decisive. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon is not a person in disguise. It's a person who understands patterns, analog precision. Earlier we saw Swords using proximity, Matahari using perception, Riley using identity, Philby using trust, Hall using resistance networks, Pugil using fiction. Turing used inevitability. Given enough intercepted messages and enough logical rigor, the system would break, not through drama, through probability. The quiet architecture Bletchley Park was not glamorous. Wooden huts, drafty rooms, long shifts. But inside those walls, history bent. Because once you can read your enemy's plans, you stop reacting. You start anticipating. That shifts the balance of power. Next, we return to fieldcraft. From spinning rotors to spinning loyalties. From code breaking to defection. Because in the Cold War, sometimes the most valuable intelligence comes from a man who decides to switch sides and live with that choice every day. Moscow, late 1970s. Gray buildings, heavy coats, long lines for bread. Longer lines for loyalty. The Cold War doesn't look like World War II. No mass invasions, no beaches stormed at dawn. It looks like tension. It sounds like static. And inside that static sits a man working for the KGB, Oleg Gordievsky. Except he isn't only working for the KGB. The insider Gordievsky was not an outsider sneaking in. He was a KGB officer from a KGB family. His father served before him. Loyalty was expected. He rose through the ranks, posted to Copenhagen, then London, polished, professional, trusted. That's what makes Cold War espionage terrifying. The most valuable asset is already inside the building. The turn, unlike the Cambridge Five, who were driven by early ideological commitment, Gordievsky's shift came later. He became disillusioned with Soviet repression, the crushing of dissent. The invasion of Czechoslovakia in 1968 left a mark. Ideology eroded. When Danish intelligence made contact, he eventually agreed to cooperate with British intelligence. Yes, the same MI6 that had once been infiltrated by Philby. History has a sense of symmetry. Gordievsky began feeding information to the West. Quietly, methodically, acting loyal. Here's the psychological strain. He continued serving in the KGB, attended meetings, wrote reports, participated in operations, all while secretly passing intelligence to MI6. Double agents must master emotional neutrality. Too cold, suspicious, too enthusiastic, also suspicious. You must perform loyalty convincingly while betraying the system. Every facial expression matters. Dead drops and signals. Cold War tradecraft was meticulous. No texting, no casual phone calls. Dead drops were common. A package hidden under a loose brick. A film canister buried in a park. Signals were subtle. A chalk mark on a lamppost, a curtain positioned a certain way in an apartment window. Surveillance detection routes were routine. Gordievsky would take complex paths through Moscow streets, doubling back, entering shops, switching transport. If someone followed consistently, the meeting was cancelled. This wasn't dramatic rooftop running. It was patience under paranoia. Intelligence of high value. Gordievsky provided critical insight into Soviet thinking. He revealed internal fears, strategic assessments, how the Kremlin interpreted Western actions. During the early 1980s, tensions escalated sharply. NATO exercises looked to Soviet leadership like possible cover for a real attack. Miscalculation could have triggered catastrophe. Gordievsky's reporting helped Western leaders understand just how nervous Moscow actually was. In the Cold War, understanding perception prevents disaster. He wasn't just leaking documents, he was translating mindset. Suspicion rises eventually. Something shifted. A CIA source in Moscow was exposed and executed. Soviet counterintelligence began reassessing internal security. Gordievsky was recalled from London in 1985. That's rarely a good sign. Back in Moscow, he sensed scrutiny tightening. Interrogations were subtle at first, then sharper. He denied everything, but suspicion in the KGB is like a slow-moving shadow. It doesn't retreat. The escape plan years earlier, British intelligence had prepared an emergency exfiltration plan. If Gordievsky ever needed extraction, he would signal using a pre-arranged method, a specific shopping bag carried in a certain way, a meeting at a bakery, timing precise. When he activated the plan, MI6 moved. British diplomats in Moscow smuggled him out in the trunk of a car, through checkpoints, through inspections, across the Finnish border. Think about that. A KGB colonel lying silent in a car trunk, trusting that paperwork, diplomacy, and luck will align. One search to thorough and it's over. He made it. Exile Gordievsky settled in Britain. Safe, but exile is complicated. He left behind homeland, language, familiar streets. Family members faced consequences. Defection is not clean. You gain freedom, you lose everything else. Living under suspicion, even after escape, the psychological residue remains. When you've lived years watching for tails, scanning reflections in windows, you don't just switch that off. Hyper-awareness becomes habit. Espionage rewires perception. Ordinary life can feel unreal after sustained secrecy. The Cold War quiet. The Cold War never exploded into direct superpower conflict, and intelligence played a role in that restraint. Understanding intent matters. Misreading fear as aggression can escalate. Gordievsky helped prevent misinterpretation at a critical time. That's not flashy, but it's powerful. Contrast with earlier spies. Sorge warned about invasion. Pugil misdirected armies. Turing broke codes. Gordievsky clarified fear. Different tools, same quiet war. He didn't just pass secrets. He bridged perception gaps between nuclear powers. That's heavy responsibility for one person carrying a shopping bag. The core lesson: double agents sit at the most dangerous intersection. They betray one system to protect another. They are trusted by both, and fully trusted by neither. If exposed, they die as traitors. If successful, they live as exiles. There's no comfortable middle ground. The quiet war keeps evolving. From occupied France to Cold War Moscow, from radio signals to diplomatic trunks. Next, we step back from individuals. We slow down, and we examine the tools themselves. Dead drops, brush passes, cipher systems. How intelligence officers are trained to disappear, because behind every name we've explored, there's trade. By now, we've met a colorful cast. Patient infiltrators, performers, masterful liars, codebreakers, and double agents. But beneath all the drama lies the backbone of espionage, tradecraft, the mundane, methodical, and sometimes tedious skills that allow spies to survive and succeed. Welcome to the Quiet War's Toolkit. Dead drops. Imagine leaving a message in a park, a hollow tree, under a park bench, not handed directly, not observed. Dead drops minimize risk. The agent places information, another picks it up later. Timing, location, and concealment are crucial. One slip, a suspicious passerby, a missing item, or a changed environment, and the chain collapses. Gordievsky used dead drops in Moscow. Hall used them in France. Sorge, too, relied on indirect methods when radios weren't secure. A dead drop is about patience and trust. No one touches it until they're supposed to. No one knows why it's there. Invisible communication in plain sight. Brush passes, dead drops are slow. Brush passes are fast. Two agents meet in a crowded street or train station. A notebook, a microfilm, or a coded envelope changes hands in seconds. No pauses, no acknowledgement. Success is in choreography, eye contact, movement, timing. It looks casual, almost mundane, but seconds of hesitation can reveal everything. Many spies, including Riley and Philby, practice this endlessly. It's like street ballet with consequences measured in lives. Cipher systems, from simple substitution codes to the rotors of the Enigma machine. Ciphers allow messages to travel safely across hostile territory. Turing's work at Bletchley Park was the extreme machine-assisted decryption, but even hand ciphers were deadly serious. A poorly encoded message is worse than none at all. It can mislead your own side or expose your network. Training in encryption and decryption is a rite of passage for any serious spy. The lesson: precision matters. Every letter counts. Safe houses. A safe house is more than a hiding place. It's a command post, a planning room, a sanctuary. Hall used them across France. Pujol created phantom addresses to enhance credibility. The Cambridge Five could hide in plain sight thanks to institutional safe zones inside government networks. Safe houses required discipline, clean entrances, minimal traces, plausible appearances. Even the smallest anomaly, an extra footprint, an unfamiliar delivery, can compromise everything. Cover legends. Every spy needs a backstory. It has to be plausible, consistent, flexible. Riley had dozens. Pujol's fictional agents had entire biographies. Hall posed as an elderly milkmaid or visiting journalist. Your cover story must survive casual scrutiny. Neighbors, shopkeepers, co-workers, border agents. If your legend fails, you don't just lose your job, you die. Surveillance detection routes. Avoiding observation is a science. Agents plan routes with loops, public spaces, and contingency options. If someone is following, the spy can notice and act. If they are not, the route appears normal. It's subtle, unobtrusive. Repetition is danger. Predictability is death. Gordievsky, Hall, and countless others spent years mastering these patterns. Patience and practice. Tradecraft isn't glamorous. It's repetitive. It's walking the same streets hundreds of times, memorizing invisible cues, practicing movements, handshakes, and stories until they become instinct. It's what separates amateurs from operatives. And here's the secret. Most espionage failures aren't from dramatic action. They're from errors in these basics. A misdelivered note, a hesitation in a handshake, a fingerprint left behind. The quiet war is won or lost in minutiae. Training to disappear, the ultimate skill. Disappearing in plain sight. Not just avoiding capture, avoiding notice entirely. Blend into crowds. Move naturally. Speak without drawing attention. Become a ghost with routines. Agents train for years. Sleep patterns, gestures, and timing are all rehearsed. A seasoned operative doesn't just survive. They make the environment forget them ever existed. The core takeaway: tradecraft is the scaffolding of all espionage. Without it, courage, intelligence, or audacity fail. Every story we've explored, Sorge's infiltration, Paul's resistance networks, Pugel's fictional army, rests on these fundamentals. Espionage is not magic, it's craft, and craft is learned, repeated, and refined until invisibility becomes second nature. From here, we transition into a more human layer of the quiet war, manipulation, because knowing how to move unseen isn't enough. Sometimes you have to influence the minds of others before they even suspect you exist. Tradecraft gives you tools, dead drops, cipher systems, cover legends, but sometimes the real power isn't in objects or routes, it's in people's minds. Psychological manipulation is the quiet war's most subtle weapon. Recruitment methods. Recruitment is about finding weakness and turning it into commitment. Some are motivated by ideology, like the Cambridge Five. Others by money, like petty informants in occupied territories. Some by ego, ambition, or fear. The recruiter's role is to understand personality deeply. What makes them tick? What are their desires, their fears, their ambitions? Espionage isn't coercion alone. It's persuasion disguised as opportunity. You don't just ask someone to betray their country. You make them believe it's the right choice, or at least the easiest one. Exploiting ego, greed, and fear. Human psychology is predictable. Ego, pride, blinds. Overconfidence makes people take unnecessary risks. Many double agents use this. Philby, for instance, enjoyed the feeling of being cleverer than everyone else. It made him perfect for ideological recruitment. Greed. Money is a classic motivator. Even small bribes can shift loyalties. Not always permanent, but enough to gain immediate intelligence. Fear. Threats are crude but effective. Blackmail or subtle intimidation pushes people to cooperate. But fear without trust creates unstable agents. They may turn when the pressure becomes unbearable. Honey traps. Seduction as strategy is old. Mata Hari perfected a theatrical version, but honey traps in modern espionage are more psychological than cinematic. They exploit emotional vulnerability, loneliness, or ambition. A skilled operative manipulates attention and desire to extract information without physical force. The key is subtlety. Consent is coerced only by social expectation, not by outright aggression. The goal isn't romance, it's control. Ideology as leverage. Convince someone their country is wrong. Frame your organization as the moral authority. Philby used this method early on. By appealing to his sense of justice and fairness, recruiters harnessed commitment stronger than money ever could. Ideology binds agents for life. It outlasts reward programs. It survives interrogation. It drives them to act, even when rational self-interest says otherwise. Layering tactics. Manipulation is rarely one-dimensional. Riley combined charm, risk-taking, and false identities. Pugel created layers of narrative, credibility, and subtle truth. A successful agent understands the interplay. Fear plus desire plus trust. Too much of one, and the target resists. Balanced correctly, and they act without realizing they're manipulated. Case mini. Sorge used ego and alcohol to coax intelligence from diplomats, then relayed it with precision. Mata Hari weaponized charm and emotional manipulation, ultimately becoming a scapegoat for French paranoia. Philby leveraged ideological alignment and personal relationships to betray from within. Hall turned underestimation and perceived vulnerability into a psychological advantage over enemies. The lesson: manipulation isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, calculated, and persistent. Ethical gray zones. Manipulation can feel unspeakably cruel. Spycraft thrives in moral ambiguity. You exploit people's trust, you exploit their fears, you exploit relationships, and yet, from the perspective of national security, these tactics save lives, or at least, prevent greater disasters. The quiet war is full of ethical trade-offs. Every decision is a balance between risk, morality, and necessity. Emotional intelligence as weapon manipulation requires observation, reading micro-expressions, timing questions, noticing hesitation. An operative who understands emotions can direct behavior without force. You don't yell, you whisper, you plant doubt, you suggest possibility. People act voluntarily, but guided toward your objective. Psychological layer of espionage. If tradecraft is the body of espionage, psychology is its mind. You can memorize dead-drop locations. You can operate a cipher flawlessly. But if you fail to influence the people around you, the information never flows. Espionage is a network of minds. Winning battles in that network often matters more than physical movement. The core takeaway: the quiet war is fought in silence, shadows, and signals. But the most effective battles are fought internally, inside the minds of allies, enemies, and even yourself. Manipulation doesn't rely on weapons. It relies on understanding, patience, observation, and timing. From here, we'll see what this constant mental pressure costs. Because maintaining secrecy isn't just difficult, it's taxing on the human soul. Next up, isolation, identity fractures, and the heavy price spies pay. So far, we've seen patience, deception, clever inventions, and psychological mastery. But there's another side to the quiet war: the human cost. Espionage isn't just dangerous, it's isolating, exhausting, and often lonely in ways no one outside the craft can imagine. Living between identities, Sorge lived in Tokyo for years, a German journalist on the surface, a Soviet operative underneath. Philby walked British halls of power while feeding Moscow information. Hall, Pugil, and Gordievsky maintained double lives for decades. Each step required compartmentalization. Every relationship had a line. Every conversation could betray your mission. The agent becomes a stranger to themselves. A life split into roles, each believable to the world but false beneath. The self becomes layered and fragile. Isolation, secrecy isolates. You can't share the truth with friends. Family may remain unaware of your actions, or worse, at risk because of them. Hall never confided in anyone fully about her operations. Her contacts were temporary, compartmentalized. Each relationship was functional, not personal. The human cost is subtle. Loneliness, anxiety, constant vigilance. Small moments of comfort, a meal, a laugh, are tinged with fear. Will someone notice? Will I be exposed? Family strain. Many spies' families suffer silently. Gordievsky's defection left relatives under scrutiny. Sorge's parents lost their son to execution. Philby's colleagues and family faced suspicion, shame, and betrayal. Being a spy often means sacrificing intimacy for information. Celebrations, grief, milestones, all are colored by secrecy. The quiet war asks for personal life in exchange for national survival. Constant movement in danger halls, wooden leg didn't slow her down. She moved from town to town, safe house to safe house, evading Gestapo surveillance. Every step carried risk. Every misstep could mean capture or death. Pugil's invention of 27 fake agents required mental endurance. Keeping track of stories, locations, and personalities for years is exhausting. Gordievsky lived with the constant tension of KGB observation. Misreading a tale could be fatal. Mental toll: the mental load is heavy and constant. Stress compounds. Sleep is intermittent. Mistakes can be deadly. Many operatives suffered from anxiety, depression, or trauma. Hall endured persistent fear of capture. Sorge faced the knowledge that one slip could end him. Turing, though far from front lines, carried the burden of knowing that every decoded Enigma message had stakes in thousands of lives. The quiet war wears on the mind in ways no battlefield scars can reveal. Death and sacrifice secrecy often carries the ultimate price. Sorge was executed. Mata Hari, executed after a trial, more about myth than evidence. Philby escaped to Moscow, but at the cost of a divided legacy. Gordievsky survived, but exile became his new reality. The sacrifices are strategic and personal. The battlefield is internal as much as external. Longevity versus psychological survival. Long-term espionage requires constant discipline. Maintaining multiple identities, suppressing natural reactions, and controlling emotions becomes a full-time job. Some thrive, some crack. Isolation intensifies over time. Relationships strain. Trust erodes. Self-perception blurs. For those who endure, life after espionage is never fully ordinary. The paradox of loyalty. Sorge remained loyal to the Soviet Union even as he lived a lie. Philby to ideology, Hall to mission, Gordievsky to principle. The paradox, living as a traitor, a hero, or both, depending on perspective. Secrecy forces constant moral calculations. Right and wrong become contextual. The weight of loyalty is always heavier than it appears. The human core. Espionage is thrilling in stories, cinematic in perception, but the real war is quiet, psychological, and exhausting. Every operation carries human consequences. Every mission demands emotional endurance. The quiet war is fought not only in cities, bunkers, and codes, but in the human mind. Next, we explore a group that often operated invisibly, underestimated by enemies and allies alike. Women in espionage, using misperception itself as a weapon. Espionage has long been painted as a man's game. Suits, guns, trench coats, and suave double lives. But reality tells a different story. Women often operated in the shadows, underestimated, overlooked, and yet devastatingly effective. Meet Nancy Wake and Josephine Baker. Two women, two very different backgrounds, one common truth. Invisibility can be the deadliest weapon. Nancy Wake, the White Mouse. Nancy Wake was nicknamed the White Mouse by the Gestapo because she seemed impossible to catch. Before the war, she was a socialite, glamorous, witty, and sharp. Once war erupted, she became one of the most effective operatives in the French resistance. She led sabotage missions, helped smuggle Allied soldiers to safety, and even orchestrated attacks on Gestapo convoys. Her key advantage: everyone underestimated her. They saw a stylish woman, not a lethal operative. She weaponized perception itself. Josephine Baker, the spy in plain sight. Josephine Baker, the famous entertainer, used her tours across Europe during World War II as cover. Famed for dance, music, and charm, she had access to high society and government functions. She gathered intelligence under the guise of performing. Notes were sewn into sheet music, letters hidden in costume accessories. Baker understood social engineering intuitively. No one suspected a glamorous performer of espionage. Her fame became her camouflage. Underestimation is leverage across history. Gender bias often worked in their favor. The enemy assumed women were peripheral, messengers, secretaries, or socialites, not leaders of resistance or intelligence networks. This misperception allowed them access to spaces men could not easily enter. Being overlooked isn't weakness in espionage, it's an advantage. Intelligence hidden in performance. Both Wake and Baker used charm, wit, and presence as tools of tradecraft, meetings disguised as social calls, conversations in cafes doubling as intelligence gathering, performances masking clandestine notes. In each case, espionage was not about brute force, it was about subtlety, psychology, and improvisation. The mission depended on the ability to blend roles seamlessly: entertainer, courier, resistance leader, risk and courage, operating under false identities, often in enemy territory, carried enormous risk. Wake reportedly escaped capture multiple times, even while wounded. Baker risked arrest and execution, traveling through Nazi-controlled Europe. Courage wasn't loud. It was quiet, meticulous, and constant. Impact beyond recognition. Women in espionage rarely received public recognition at the time. Their contributions were hidden, classified, or overshadowed by male counterparts. Yet their operations saved lives, disrupted enemy plans, and shaped the course of the war. Like Hall, their effectiveness lay in their ability to leverage invisibility, perception, and cunning. Themes and takeaways. Underestimation is an operational advantage. Enemies often overlook what they consider ordinary. Performance and social skills are powerful intelligence tools. Charm, observation, and improvisation can be just as effective as codes and guns. Secrecy and courage are intertwined. Effectiveness comes from enduring risk while maintaining composure. Espionage isn't only about shadowy figures with guns. Sometimes it's about grace, adaptability, and the quiet power of being unseen. Next, the battlefield moves from shadows and streets to circuits and signals. The quiet war enters a new phase, the digital age, where data replaces footsteps and cyber espionage becomes the modern frontier. The world has changed, but the quiet war has not ended. It has simply moved into a new realm, invisible to the naked eye, but no less consequential. Welcome to the digital age of espionage. Gone are the days when spies had to cross borders physically, build safe houses, or slip microfilm into shoes. Today, information is the battlefield, and bytes are the weapons. From dead drops to data drops in World War II, Hall left messages in hollow trees. Pugil invented agents. Turing decoded encrypted radio signals. Today, agents send information across networks. A dead drop is now a secure file server. A brush pass can be a USB stick swapped in an elevator. The principle remains the same: stealth, compartmentalization, and plausible deniability. The medium evolves, but the rules of invisibility persist. State actors maintain clandestine servers in distant countries. Encrypted communications replace coded radio bursts. Anonymous email accounts and secure messaging apps are the modern tradecraft toolkit. Cyber espionage. Cyber espionage is intelligence gathering conducted via networks, often without ever leaving a chair. State-sponsored hackers target government agencies, defense contractors, multinational corporations, anyone with strategic information. The tools are sophisticated: malware, phishing, trojans, zero-day exploits, and yet the core principles echo those of Hall, Pugil, and Gordievsky: access, observation, and patience. You need to know where the information is, how to reach it without leaving a trace, and when to extract it. Digital surveillance. Surveillance is no longer just tails and camera traps. It's omnipresent. Governments monitor internet traffic, metadata, and patterns of behavior. Algorithms flag anomalies. AI can predict movement and connections. Modern agents have to operate in a world where every digital footprint can be traced back. A misplaced login, an exposed IP address, or a careless click can blow a network. The stakes are high, but the methods are subtle. One wrong line of code, one unencrypted message, can compromise operations on a global scale. Information warfare in the digital era. Intelligence isn't just about stealing secrets, it's about shaping perception. Disinformation campaigns, deepfakes, and social media manipulation can sway public opinion or destabilize governments. Remember Pujol? He fabricated 27 agents to mislead the Nazis. Modern equivalents do it with memes, fake news, and bot networks. Influence has moved from interpersonal charm to mass-scale psychological operations, but the principle is identical. Manipulate belief, control information flow, and guide decisions without detection. State-sponsored hacking. Some of the most powerful espionage operations today come from national cyber agencies. China, Russia, the United States, Israel, all have teams of specialists infiltrating networks worldwide. They operate quietly. No explosions, no gunfire. But the outcomes are dramatic. Stolen defense secrets, disrupted elections, compromised industrial networks. The quiet war is not always silent in consequence. A breach of sensitive data can shift geopolitical balance overnight. Human elements in digital espionage. Even in a world dominated by technology, the human element remains central. Social engineering is the hacker's psychological lever. Phishing emails, fake identities, and deceptive communication to coax people into revealing passwords or confidential information. This mirrors the old espionage tactic of exploiting ego, fear, or desire. Humans remain the weak link in the chain. Just as Hall used social cues to move undetected, or Pujol manipulated trust to convince the Nazis, modern spies manipulate human behavior online. Analog versus digital tradecraft. Some lessons from analog espionage still apply. Compartmentalization. Only those who need the information should access it. Even today, Need 2 principles govern classified systems. Redundancy, backups, mirrored servers, and multiple channels ensure that if one line is compromised, operations continue. Cover legends. In digital espionage, personas and avatars replace physical disguises. One fake identity can interact with dozens of real targets. Despite changes in medium, the fundamentals endure. Cyber counterintelligence. Every tool has a counter. Cyber counterintelligence detects, tracks, and neutralizes digital threats. Intrusion detection systems, firewalls, honeypots, and AI monitoring are the new surveillance detection routes of old. For every agent infiltrating a network, another team watches patterns, flags anomalies, and predicts possible exposure. The tension between offensive and defensive intelligence is continuous and invisible, like two chess masters playing a game with thousands of pieces in real time. Case study: notable digital operations. Stuxnet 2010, a sophisticated virus targeting Iranian nuclear facilities. It delayed programs without a single shot fired. PRISM 2013, mass surveillance revealing vulnerabilities in communication. Operatives analyzed metadata to anticipate and disrupt plans. Election interference. Disinformation campaigns manipulate political outcomes using social media, a digital extension of influence operations pioneered by Pujol and Wake. The quiet war may have traded cafes for servers, but its methods echo the past. Mental strain in the digital age. Espionage has always been stressful. The digital era adds a new layer: permanence. Unlike a note hidden in a tree, a digital trace can be forever. Every action is logged, stored, and potentially analyzed decades later. Agents must maintain focus under constant digital scrutiny. One mistake can compromise hundreds or thousands of operations. Isolation remains. Most digital spies work alone, at a screen, relying on distant colleagues for verification. The mental load is immense. Patterns, probabilities, and algorithms now replace footsteps, disguises, and dead drops. Adaptation and innovation. As the battlefield changes, so do operatives. Old-school techniques are adapted. Encrypted messaging replaces radio codes. VPNs and Tor replace safe routes. Digital personas replace physical disguises. Yet the underlying principles, invisibility, patience, misdirection, remain constant. The modern spy is a hybrid, part hacker, part psychologist, part strategist. Lessons from history applied digitally. Every generation of espionage informs the next. Patience. Sorge's years in Tokyo are mirrored in months of monitoring servers. Manipulation. Pugel's fabricated network echoes in modern influence campaigns. Analytical rigor. Turing's pattern recognition is the foundation of today's AI-assisted cyber operations. Adaptability. Hall, Wake, and Baker's improvisation translates into creative responses to network vulnerabilities. The medium changes, but human ingenuity remains the constant. The quiet war today. Today's quiet war is everywhere and nowhere. It hides in networks, databases, and cloud servers. It whispers through social media, email, and code. It shapes decisions, influences policy, and can alter the course of nations without a single soldier moving across a battlefield. It's quieter, yes, but far from harmless. Espionage may have gone digital, but the essence of the craft, invisibility, subtlety, patience, and manipulation remains. Core takeaways. Information is the modern battlefield. The prize is knowledge, influence, and decision-making leverage. Psychology remains central. Even in cyber operations, human error and human behavior are exploited. Tradecraft evolves, but fundamentals endure. Dead drops become digital drops, but compartmentalization, cover, and vigilance remain essential. The mental cost persists. Isolation, stress, and secrecy are timeless burdens. Espionage has moved from streets, safe houses, and coded radios to circuits, servers, and algorithms. The quiet war never stopped. It just became invisible to those who aren't looking. Next, we explore failure when tradecraft fails, when human error intervenes, and when even the most disciplined operations unravel in unexpected ways. We began this journey in dimly lit studies, following footsteps that were rarely seen. We traced spies across continents, from Tokyo to Moscow, London to occupied France, and even into the invisible world of cyberspace. Now, we pause, we reflect, and we consider the invisible hands that have shaped history. Espionage is rarely cinematic. It doesn't roar or explode on command. Its victories are subtle. Its influence, monumental yet almost imperceptible. These are the quiet architects of history. Wars shaped by whispers. Consider a war avoided because intelligence revealed enemy intentions. Convoys redirected. Plans exposed. Decisions delayed. Lives saved. Wars shortened. Richard Sorge warned Moscow of Operation Barbarossa. Without his intelligence, the Soviet Union might have faced catastrophe in 1941. Juan Pugel Garcia misled the Nazis into believing DHA would occur at Pas-de-Calais. His fictional network didn't just save lives, it ensured the success of a turning point in history. Alan Turing broke the Enigma codes. His work shortened the European theater of World War II by years, arguably saving millions of lives. All of this happened quietly, no public parades, no dramatic recognition, just the slow, deliberate work of intelligence. History, often presented as the story of generals, politicians, and battles, is also the story of whispers in rooms, coded messages, and unseen calculations. The invisible hand of ideology. The Cambridge Five, Philby, Burgess, Maclean, and their colleagues remind us that influence isn't always a matter of weapons. They were ideologues, placing loyalty to their vision of a future above the state they served. Through subtle manipulation, ideological devotion, and social maneuvering, they reshaped intelligence networks from within. The quiet war isn't only defensive. Sometimes it's the deliberate reshaping of events, invisible to those living them in the moment. Even modern cyber espionage operates on this principle. By influencing perception, decision-making, and policy, agents can redirect the course of nations without anyone noticing until the effects are irreversible. Trust as currency. Trust is the rarest resource in espionage. Gordievsky navigated it daily. Every interaction in Moscow was a calculation. Who can be trusted? Who can be manipulated? Who is watching? Who might report? Virginia Hall survived because she exploited underestimation and subtle trust networks. Trust in espionage is fragile, layered, and priceless. When managed wisely, it allows one person to achieve outcomes equivalent to entire armies. But once broken, it can cascade into disaster. Betrayal echoes through networks, history, and the lives of operatives. The architecture of influence espionage is about shaping reality without being seen, building credible identities, constructing networks of influence, anticipating decisions before they're made, exploiting weaknesses in human psychology. The sum of these actions, when executed quietly, becomes a form of invisible architecture. The world we live in is partly the product of these hidden structures. Wars ended, leaders guided, policies shifted, all under the radar, all in whispers. Nancy Wake's sabotage missions didn't just disrupt Nazi operations, they reshaped local perceptions of resistance. Josephine Baker's intelligence gathering wasn't flashy, but it helped the Allies interpret critical social and political cues during wartime. Even digital espionage today is a continuation, shaping decisions, steering debates, and guiding outcomes through unseen networks of influence and data. The human cost revisited. Every quiet architect pays a price. Richard Sorge paid with his life. Virginia Hall moved constantly, her body and mind stretched to extremes. Gordievsky lost his homeland and family, living in exile for decades. Touring, despite saving millions, was criminalized by the society he protected. The cost of secrecy is personal. Isolation, fear, the burden of carrying knowledge that cannot be shared. The cost of influence is moral, choosing which truths to reveal, which lies to permit, which actions to take while remaining invisible. Espionage is never cost-free. Even when successful, the human toll lingers. Quiet power in a loud world history often celebrates heroes in bold strokes. Generals, revolutionaries, kings, presidents. But the quiet architects work in shadows, without recognition, without applause. Their power is subtle, cumulative, and often anonymous. A single well-timed report, a carefully fabricated identity, a decrypted message can change the fate of millions. The stakes are enormous. The work is methodical. The victories are rarely acknowledged. And yet, the world we inhabit, the policies we follow, the borders we see, the outcomes of conflicts are shaped just as much by these invisible hands as by armies and governments. The continuum of espionage, from Richard Sorge to Alan Turing, from Virginia Hall to Oleg Gordievsky, from Pugel's fictional network to modern digital spies, one theme is clear. The quiet war is eternal. It adapts. It evolves. World War II saw spies crossing borders, creating false identities, and building networks on the ground. The Cold War introduced ideological defection, counterintelligence, and invisible observation. Today, espionage thrives in cyberspace, manipulating information, data, and perception. The medium changes. The principles endure: patience, subtlety, observation, manipulation, and discretion. Every new generation learns from the previous, standing on the shoulders of invisible giants. Final reflection: espionage reminds us that not all influence is loud. The most effective interventions often leave no mark on the surface, yet their consequences ripple through time. A sealed envelope placed in a drawer, a message never publicly read, decisions guided by invisible hands, networks built, lives altered, wars shortened or prevented. The quiet war is a meditation in patience, intellect, and human understanding. It is a craft, a science, and an art. It is both shadow and architecture, shaping the world while remaining hidden. Closing thought: history is rarely written in headlines alone. It is whispered in code, hidden in reports, and carried in the minds of those who understood its importance before anyone else did. Spies are not just performers or deceivers. They are architects of possibility, editors of fate, and guardians of secrets that allow the world to continue spinning, mostly unaware, mostly unchanged on the surface, yet subtly guided at every turn. The envelope is placed in the drawer. The message will never be read, and the world moves forward, shaped by the quiet, unseen hands of those who understood that silence, observation, and subtlety are sometimes more powerful than armies, laws, or guns. The quiet war endures, invisible but ever present, and so do its architects. And just like that, we step back out of the shadows. From coded messages and invisible ink to double agents who fooled entire governments. The secret tactics of history's most famous spies remind us of one powerful truth. Sometimes the quietest moves make the biggest impact. While generals commanded armies in the open, these operatives fought their battles in silence, with patience, persuasion, and nerves of steel. Which tactic surprised you the most? Was it the psychological mind games, the clever disguises, the daring double crosses? Let me know in the comments. I love reading your thoughts, and your ideas often inspire future videos. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden side of history, don't forget to like this video. It really helps the channel grow and lets YouTube know you want more deep dives like this. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next journey into the secret stories history tried to hide. When you're ready for another adventure, check out the related videos on your screen, whether it's legendary rulers, lost civilizations, or the untold lives of powerful queens and kings. There's always another mystery waiting to be uncovered. Until next time, stay curious, stay clever, and remember, not every hero works in the spotlight. I'll see you in the next story.